and welcome back to Real Estate Live UK's February 2022 event. Our programmes of virtual events and presentations take place 3 times a year and are brought to you by White Label and our partners. And we'd like to thank all the organisations that have contributed to the brilliant panels taking place this week, and particularly the London Borough of Barnet, who are hosting our next session. This week, places across the UK are showcasing investment opportunities, and industry experts will be exploring ideas and topical issues relating to property. Several of the conversations this week are also linked to our key themes for the February programme: sustainability and biodiversity, inclusive communities, and future infrastructure. You can see the full programme of sessions taking place and register for any others that are of interest by visiting our website, realestatelive.co.uk. Next up this morning, we have a discussion on North Finchley's regeneration and some ambitious investment plans that are taking place in the London Borough of Barnet. Just before we start, I'd like to remind the audience to please feel free to ask questions of our panel using Zoom's Q&A function. And now I'm pleased to hand over to our chair for this session, David, who is the co-founder at Commonplace. Over to you, David.
Hi, good morning. Good morning to the panelists. Thank you, Bonnie, and good morning to our audience. Great to be here. And Real Estate Live is just a fantastic cornucopia of interesting events that anyone can join. So I do encourage you to see what's still on the programme and join for more of that. This morning we'll be talking about North Finchley. North Finchley is a town centre in the Borough of Barnet in North London. It is a long high street. It is very diverse. The communities are diverse. The shopping is diverse. Lots of small shops, lots of independents, a mix of retail and food outlets. It's also wedged between some other high streets and centres that in some ways overshadow it at the moment, although it's still very, very popular. So you've got Whetstone in the north, which is becoming a bit of a foodie mecca. You've got Brent Cross, famous shopping mall. You've got Muswell Hill, a bit more upmarket perhaps. And then you've got North Finchley, which for the local people is an absolutely vital space and has huge potential. Our speakers today are all involved in one way or another in the development of North Finchley. And through their experience in North Finchley, we'll also open a bit of a window onto some of the dilemmas and challenges of bringing high streets into the post-pandemic 21st century. As if the 21st century challenges for retail weren't enough, we've also now in the post-pandemic area, and that has also led us all to think again, perhaps, about what we want to see in high streets. I'm David Janner-Klausner. I'm a co-founder of Commonplace. Commonplace is a company that specializes in digital public engagement, particularly in areas around the built environment. And you can find more about us and about me online. But I'd love to start by introducing our panelists for today, who will highlight different aspects of this partnership between the private and public sector in thinking about reviving the high street. Our first speaker will be Zeina Al-Derry. Zeina is a senior project manager for the town centre, and she will present the backdrop and the background to the North Finchley town centre. She will be followed by Steve Harrington. Steve Harrington is the planning director at Regal London, who are co-signatories, to the development agreement with the London Borough of Barnet to start redeveloping and reviving the area. Followed by Jonathan Joseph. Jonathan is a man of vision and strategic imagination, and his strategic imagination and his energies have underpinned some huge developments, including what's happening around Brent Cross at the moment, which is of national significance. And finally, Councillor Sarah Wardle, who is the Vice Chair of Housing and Growth for the London Borough of Barnet, and she is Chair of the North Finchley Partnership Board. The London Borough of Barnet has a history of quite exciting partnerships with the private sector, sometimes controversial, so it'd be fascinating to hear from her about also some of the political philosophy around how you muster resources to regenerate in this age of probably continuing austerity. I don't think we're post-austerity yet. So with that introduction over, Zeina, please going to hand over to you.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name is Zeina Al-Derry. I'm a Town Centre's Senior Project Officer. mostly working to oversee North Finchley at Barnet Council. So for context, Barnet is located in London's northern perimeter. It's the most populous borough in London. It's like a city in itself. In terms of population, it's the same size as Bristol and over twice the size as Oxford City. It is a diverse borough with ethnic minorities accounting for more than 1/5 of its population. It's also known for its great schools and green open spaces. Nowhere is far from a park in Barnet. Within Barnet itself, North Finchley is geographically located to the east of the borough. It is near Woodsize Park and West Finchley Northern Line tube stations. There are about 30 town centres in the borough, and North Finchley is one of the 7 designated main town centres. These are the largest economic centres of activity, which is why we focus on them in our work. Across the country, the future of high streets is an ongoing concern, and most of the challenges faced by North Finchley Town Centre are not unique. This includes significant changes in retail trends, moving towards online shopping, and national chain stores starting to leave the high street, like Argos or WH Smith in the case of North Finchley. And the scale and nature of this vacant retail stocks requires too much upward investment from smaller businesses. As you can see, North Finchley has the highest commercial vacancy across the main town centres, which is also higher than the London average. Another challenge is the fragmented land ownership. There are over 300 different ownerships in the town centre, which makes it difficult to come up with a cohesive response to the different issues facing it. Other challenges include the fact that the town centre is linear in form without a specific heart, with the traffic-dominated environment creating severance and a hollow centre. All this creates a poor and cluttered public realm environment with poor community activation. And although the town centre experiences fair footfall, the average dwell time on the high street is the lowest in comparison to the other main town centres. Aware of some of these issues, we started working with partners in 2016 that led to the development of the Supplementary Planning Document, or the SPD. In consultation with the local community, we established a shared long-term vision and principles to inform good design and guide any development proposals in North Finchley. This SPD was adopted by the council at committee in 2018, and all the work we're doing now refers back to what is set out in that document. We are still working to ensure the community continues to be involved every step of the way. For example, as an output of the SPD, we have set up the North Finchley Partnership Board, which is a representative group of people from the local community, ensuring the community's aspiration is represented and that our work remains in check. And also, since the adoption of the SPD, the council has partnered with Regal London to overcome the challenges identified and bring forward positive change to the town centre in alignment with the SPD's vision and the community's priorities. And the council has also agreed to use its CPO powers if required to support site accumulation in response to the identified challenges around land ownership. And as the SPD identified, there is a community want for public realm improvements and for those to be done in a coordinated and comprehensive manner. To make sure we achieve this alongside the work with Regal, the council is also commissioning and developing a public realm design framework for the town centre. This process will involve extensive consultation with the local community to actively curate and stitch together the various town centre uses. This framework will also establish a short, medium, and long-term plan to deliver public realm improvements such as improve accessibility, greening, and community activation. With community activation being at the heart of this regeneration, the council is also working with the local community to co-develop a cultural and a wayfinding strategies. This is to highlight and celebrate the town centre's heritage, connect local attractions, and guide long-term placemaking interventions in the town centre. Drawing out these local riches will also help create a distinctive graphic identity that communicates what North Finchley is about to local community and visitors from further afield. This includes creating a town centre website that includes a business directory, local events, and community destinations. This commission aims to nurture a local context and inspire site-specific responses to any future development. This is a big, long-term, complex project, while the high street is struggling now. So what are we doing about it? So over the short term, we are building relationships, testing things, and prototyping. These include supporting the evening and the leisure economy through the Temporary Street Space Fund, which is an outdoor seating space that supports independent businesses. We're also promoting cultural activation through the Discover Barnet program, which includes events and exhibitions like the Town Centre's Heroes exhibition that celebrates local people who have gone above and beyond to serve their local community during these challenging times. We're also embarking on a comprehensive business support program to cultivate a common business voice and nurture local skills and abilities. So many exciting things are happening. So watch this space, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Zeina. That's great. We're getting some questions which are quite detailed about the future of the area. And I think it's probably fair to say at the outset, these are quite early days. So I think some of the questions that are very specific about dispersal of traffic to Nether Street, for example, it's probably way too soon to try and answer them. But if any of the panelists want to address any of the questions, then please do. But I just want to say to the audience, please appreciate that these are quite early days. Steve, you're up next, and it'd be great to hear your perspective, moving as we are from the local authority to the private sector partners.
Thanks, David. I think Zeina's given a really great overview there of a lot of what's kind of already come forward, so I'll try and not repeat it in too much detail. But my name's Steve Harrington. I am Planning Director at Regal London. Regal London, for those who aren't familiar with the business, is it's a privately owned mixed-use developer. We focus on residential-led developments right the way across London. I think the clue is in the name with the Regal London. We work exclusively in London and across the London boroughs. So we are, in that sense, kind of very, very kind of local to the issues that London faces on a daily basis in a development context. I think even going beyond that, 4 of the founders of Regal London are actually born and bred in Barnet. So I know, David, you've lived in the borough for quite some time, as has Jonathan, and I think Regal has that local connection as well, which is why the project is of real fascination and interest to us. I suppose a little bit about Regal London and how we got involved. As a business, we've obviously known Jonathan Joseph for a very, very long time, and Jonathan over the years has been talking to us about his kind of ideas and vision for kind of town centre kind of renewal and regeneration. And I know he's going to speak a little bit more about that in a minute, so I won't kind of steal his thunder. But suffice to say, he hooked Regal on the idea, and we got talking over the last couple of years about the potential of North Finchley. I think, as alluded to in Zeina's slides, we were lucky and fortunate enough last year to reach agreement with colleagues at Barnet on the signing of a development agreement, which really sets in train now a formal process about how we start to deliver on all of the vision and the aspiration outlined in the SPD. So in terms of what we're doing next, we are, as you said, at a very, very early stage. We have launched a number of engagement and community initiatives late last year, no plug intended for yourselves, but including a Commonplace website, which has some really, really useful kind of surveying and mapping tools on there. And I think actually it's testament to that kind of facility in terms of the level of interest we've had already from the surrounding community. I think we're running up on 12 or 1,300 individual comments on there already, which I guess when you think about in a kind of period around Omicron, we certainly would have been able to get out in December and January to meet that many people face to face. So it's absolutely fantastic that we've had that kind of tool available to us to get the kind of discussion going. Alongside that, we have been going out meeting, some of the groups who've got a very strong local interest, whether that is local residents associations, some of the civic societies, including the Finchley Society, all of the local ward councillors and others, and other community groups. And we're now moving actually this weekend to a period of kind of community workshops, which we're hosting at the Arts Depot. So tomorrow afternoon, starting tomorrow afternoon right the way through the weekend, we're combining a mix of walks around the town centre with workshops where we will look, I guess, to start to discuss some of the good things and the bad things about the town centre as it currently is. What's working, what's not working, what's there that's existing and people like, and equally what would people like to see and have there. So it's very, very exploratory stage for us on all this work, and I think through till probably early summer we will want to kind of continue to engage with people and get their ideas and aspirations for the area. We'll then capture that into a kind of a summary of our first phase of engagement, and then throughout the remainder of this year we'll really start to develop up a master plan. Probably just finish up just mentioning some of the team we're working with on that. So JTP are our master plan architects. They will provide some of the overall vision, working alongside practices like civic engineers and Planet IE, who, to those in the industry kind of and familiar with some of these names, are real kind of front runners in terms of town centre renewal and regeneration. So we think we've assembled a fantastic team to work around us, and we're really, really kind of eager to move on and see what happens next and where this all takes us. So I might stop there because I'm sure there'll be lots more will come up in questions. So.
Thank you very much, Steve. That's brilliant. We'll move on to Jonathan next. Jonathan, if you could just elaborate a bit more about how you see the development of this particular high street and in the wider context of the challenges facing high streets, I think that'd be brilliant.
Thank you very much. Very interesting introductory talks from my colleagues. It's amazing how much one can learn even knowing them so well. I've been lucky enough over 50 years of being involved in the property business and counting to have had a chance to consider some of the big issues of urban regeneration. I've put together a very significant town centre development in Glasgow, which is, I think, where I really started, on the River Clyde, and together with partners over about 12 years, we built a couple of million square feet of mixed-use development on the Clyde, and it's still regarded, I believe, as a great asset in Glasgow. I've done a couple of interesting retail schemes, and I suppose the thing that really preoccupied me greatly for the best part of 20 years was the regeneration of the Brent Cross and Cricklewood area. My involvement there started as a partner of what was then known as Railtrack, which was the privatized business of what was British Rail. And they had a very interesting strip of land alongside the railway. It was very salubrious. It contained a rather antiquated waste transfer station. There were a whole series of very odd industries that I shan't go into them too much, but together with Hammerson, who owned Brent Cross Shopping Centre, we ended up getting planning permission for one of the largest regeneration sites in Europe. And it is actually now underway under the stewardship of some very good people, some people called Related, who are major developers in New York. We have Argent, who are inspired developers. They really are. I wake up every morning and think to myself, why can't I be more like Argent? Don't answer that question. That's an aspiration. And Barnet themselves own a big chunk of the freehold and contribute enormously to the development. It's from that, actually, that the whole question of high streets emerged, because during some of the public consultation, some of the nicer people would approach me and say, "You swine." Actually, it wasn't exactly what they said. It was, slightly more direct than that. If you ever get consent for this, you will kill off what is left of the high street. And I thought to myself, it's not the correct statement. I'm certain it's not the correct statement. I don't know why it's not. But when I finish my stage of putting together Brent Cross Cricklewood, I'm going to find out. And I suppose over the last 5-6 years, I must have walked up and down 100 high streets, quite a lot of them in London, but others around the country. And very interestingly, I can't see more than 4 major questions. The answers are complicated, but the questions are, residents by and large have deserted the high street. This is 100 years of urbanization in the UK with people who have left the high street and have gone to live in suburbia, often only maybe quarter of a mile, half a mile from where they might have lived as shopkeepers in the high street. But there's been a huge depopulation of high streets, and that takes its toll on the vivacity of the town centre. The second thing is that in the British way, we like to own our properties. I saw that one of the questions earlier said, how many owners are there? Well, we've identified something like 250 to 260 individual freeholds, and pulling together a team like that to work in unison is frankly impossible. There are all kinds of people who own the properties. Some of them rely on the properties for income. Some of them are in Cayman Island trusts. Nobody in circumstances like this is happy to work together. And one of the preconditions of our becoming involved as partners with London Borough of Barnet was that we talked with them and we have mutually agreed that we have to assemble big land parcels in order to effect good development. And that's what we're going to do. The third thing is that they've all got too long. Why did they get too long? Very simply because of that urbanization. Huge tracts of land were turned into semi-detached and terraced housing, and what was left behind during the day when the male money earner went off to work was a woman with a family, no car, and frequently no fridge. So walking to a convenient local stockist or haberdasher or whatever was part of society. Well, things have changed. We live in a much more equal society today, and better public transport. Dare I say, more people having cars. The necessity for that length of high street filled with increasingly isolated retail offer is just not there anymore, and the high street bluntly bleeds out very often. It's all very well having what looks like 80%, 85% occupancy, which is the fact in North Finchley. But unless those are vibrant people and offering vibrant services that are in demand locally, it's a one-way street in the wrong direction. Having said that, there are a number of very good traders in North Finchley, 1 or 2 decent restaurants. Concentrating those, helping people develop their premises, helping them develop their businesses is a key part of what we're talking about. And working with them to overcome the seemingly inexorable trend of online shopping seems to me to be the right way to go to create new communities. Add to that good quality residential, good quality amenity, good quality public space, and a soul for the town centre. We're very lucky to have a terrific starter in the form of that arts depot. But I was very much around working with the London Borough of Barnet when the arts depot was created. And I can tell you that it's a hard-born child. Needs a lot of love, a lot of attention to bring it forward again. And we are fans of it, and we hope to do something very constructive. So That's my introductory bit. It's an incredible opportunity. We need huge community and stakeholder involvement and support. And as Steve, who represents my partners, Regal London, who are great people, as he says, we're in the middle of the early stages of trying to understand what that all means. And we take that very, very seriously. Thank you.
Jonathan, thank you very much. As a geographer, I immediately connected to this description of yours. Placing sort of space within its history is absolutely vital to understand where we've been, but also to reimagine where we're going. And the job of reimagining, to a large extent, should be the job of politicians. And then to assemble and muster the forces that can bring about change. So I'm delighted that we have Councillor Sarah Wardle with us as our final panelist here. And Sarah will tell us a little bit about their Barnet's perspective and the perspective on the partnership that will move North Finchley forward. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you very much. And may I just start by sort of setting out our overarching approach really to a lot of development issues within the borough. And that is where we are really committed to harnessing the real benefits that can be achieved from development to positively impact our communities and our residents. There are a huge amount of opportunities and benefits that go along with opportunities like this. And elsewhere in the borough, development is really contributing to our communities in the forms of things like new rail stations, multi-million-pound investment in our parks and open spaces, investing in community projects and really looking at how we can bring betterment to our different wards across the borough. It also provides a number of different career opportunities for those for our residents today. And finally, really why we're here today is to explain how all of that fits into helping and supporting our town centres. And as already been touched upon through earlier speakers, in Barnet, we don't solely rely on private developers or landowners for our growth, nor do we always accept that we can go it alone. It is all about partnership. And we've had a number of extremely successful partnerships throughout the borough that have delivered great betterment. I mean, as Jonathan mentioned, what initially started as a council-led regeneration, now partnering with Argent at Brent Cross, Cricklewood, delivering a new town centre along with, all the bells and whistles of infrastructure, job and employment opportunities that come as part of that as well. And we've really learned from a lot of those partnership experiences, especially on things like, our estate regens, where almost entirely through that programme of work. And we are really looking to have learned from those experiences and develop new collaborative ways of working to improve our town centres. And that's where North Finchley is one of the main sort of grounds in which we're looking to make a start. And I'm not going to repeat everything that Zeina quite eloquently put forward about some of the issues with North Finchley. What I would say is that North Finchley is also a really, valued high street. It's got a lot of positives, a lot of opportunities, but we are concerned about the consistent rise in vacancies, about the sort of the poor public realm. And we do ultimately want to make sure that this high street is fit for the future and can, weather any sort of post-pandemic related storms in the future. And unlike other town centres, I suppose North Finchley is unique in the fact that there was no one key site that would unlock comprehensive planned development in the way that we wanted to see that come forward. For instance, in Edgware, you have a large parcel of land around the station and around the Broadwalk shopping centre. In North Finchley, the land assembly is far more fragmented, and really it is very, very difficult to get that critical mass in order to get that first phase going and it be a real comprehensive as opposed to piecemeal development. And that's, one of the real benefits that this partnership opportunity has afforded us, with obviously the council putting forward a number of their sites, working with Jonathan Joseph, who's been very diligent on the land assembly front for a number of years now. And obviously really delighted to have Regal on board, where we can see all of this vision start to come together. And it is a particularly ambitious project. There are a number of different strands that we want to write. Again, because of some of the sort of complexities associated with land ownership, even if we were to get the odd parcel coming forward, they wouldn't be large sites. They wouldn't be the kind of sites that would be generating a significant amount of investment that we can then channel into tackling some of the more strategic issues, tackling some of the deficiencies in the public realm. So this is a really, really exciting opportunity to take a long, hard look. And as Jonathan said, it is the opportunity to really curate the high street. But as part of that, in curating that high street and creating a new vision to support what's good about North Finchley and what's already there, but also really improving and investing in it for the future. Central to that process is obviously the SPD and particularly the Partnership Board. Now, the Partnership Board, as Zeina said, is a curation of a number of different local community stakeholders, those who use the high street, those who work there, those who have their businesses, and they will really be guiding through not only the proposals as Regal bring them forward, but also as other developers come into North Finchley within the SPD area as well. And we really want to be able to balance growth and improvements while also preserving the character and quality of what makes North Finchley particularly good and exciting. So I think I'll sort of wrap my comments up there and not sort of dig into further time for questions.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We've had several questions on the Q&A. May I just start off by asking about where you see the role of additional housing? And Jonathan identified one of the causes of the difficulties of High Street is the flight from high streets. And I'm just curious where you see the role of residential, given also what Steve said about Regal's focus on residential. So it'd be interesting to hear about the role of that and also maybe your housing build goals and how they fit in. After that, I would like to go to audience question, and Zeina, it'd be great after Sarah to hear from you a little bit more about the public engagement framework, which several people have asked about, and then we'll take it from there. So Sarah, please, if we could start with you.
Yeah, we see that the housing is a really, really important piece. I mean, Barnet is the most populous borough in London. We do expect the population to be rising by sort of 66,000 over the next 20 years or so. And we've got some really, really challenging targets as a borough to deliver new housing and new growth. I think obviously the new homes in the high street are very, very essential. And we've got this real unique opportunity now as we improve the offer, the commercial offer, and really the footfall and the dwell time in North Finchley to make sure that new residents moving in instantly know what is available on their doorstep and are really enthused to use it. I mean, I live in a different part of Barnet, which we are now really looking to invest in the high street, and that's come as a result of the new development that I live in. And again, one thing that I am particularly keen that we don't lose sight of is the importance of providing people the opportunity for home ownership and even just a higher quality, sustainable to live. I mean, I know from my first-hand experience what a nightmare it can be bouncing around various different private sector rentals in London. And, you know, it's really, really important for us as a borough that we do give those people who, have grown up in the area, who want to stay in the area and raise their families here, the opportunity to really stay in Barnet, contribute to the community and contribute to making North Finchley a thriving place.
Thank you. That's great. And the housing targets are obviously very challenging. And if you can leverage them into reviving high streets, and that's obviously a really interesting proposition. Steve, over to you.
Thanks, David. I mean, just to follow on some of Sarah's points, obviously Sarah's kind of set out the council's corporate objectives, really. I suppose our role in this is how we then translate them, at the local level in North Finchley in terms of what development proposals we'll ultimately bringing forward. And I suppose for us, we see the different types of housing that can come forward here being varied and many. We will be very, very clear at the outset that there's a place for affordable housing, dealing with some of the issues that Sarah mentions in terms of some of the existing poor quality stock, which is a London-wide issue, not unique to Barnet, but nonetheless North Finchley has its kind of issues with some poor quality housing stock. So that's something we will absolutely be committed to addressing as development comes forward. Yes, homes for sale, but also yes, homes for rent. And by that we mean build to rent, which again is something which is becoming more commonplace now for those who want to I guess, be that bit more footloose before they settle down and put down permanent roots, but doing that in a way that it's not kind of at the mercy of private rented landlords, that someone can come in on a 3-year tenancy, which might suit them for work purposes or where they are at that stage in their life, and live in high quality rented accommodation. But equally for us, I think elderly accommodation and specific elderly affordable and elderly kind of managed accommodation is something which is important to us at Regal London. We have been involved in developments along those lines in boroughs like Westminster, where we see the huge benefit of providing new and refurbished elderly affordable housing accommodation, and we see and have first-hand experience of how that benefits those residents, because importantly it's about their kind of connection back to the place where they are and people's connection as they move kind of into the later stages of their life. You want people to be in town centres and have that daily interaction and engagement, and I think things like COVID have brought that ringing home to us. So yeah, housing of all types is the broad vision now, and I think we will start to distill that down over the next number of months as we study it in much more detail.
Great, thank you very much. Let's move to the issue of engagement, which is clearly exercising quite a few people in the audience. And Zeina, thank you for offering to start addressing those questions.
Right. So I read the question that was directed to me as well, but I guess the other ones will feed into that. So we, in terms of engagement, so we have obviously, as mentioned, set up the North Finchley Partnership Board. And this partnership, the way we've set it up, we had to go through an extensive onboarding process where we invited as many people as we can to apply. I was personally going from shop to shop on the high street, just telling people about it and inviting them to apply. So we actually try to reach as many people as we can through the application process. And then this was assessed in line with the council's scoring system. And we also made sure that there is a balance between age, sex, gender, ethnic background, religious belief, to make sure that it's as representative as possible. This will be kind of this group will be meeting quarterly, and with kind of some other kind of communication in between as well. So that remains only one way of engaging people. The other kind of things we're doing is like we're working hard to ensure transparency is kind of out there. And for example, on this, we are working on preparing an FAQ document, and this will be live on the council's website once we have finished kind of drafting it. And this will include all of the commonly asked questions that we keep receiving about North Finchley through the Freedom of Information Act, all the questions we receive through other kind of methods. So we are preparing this whole document, and this will be live on the council website. And we're also preparing a leaflet that addresses some of these kind of key points, and also to give updates on the development. All of this is still kind of being prepared. So we, from the council's perspective, we are about to kind of launch this process. And then on top of this, with the different commissions that the council is leading on at the moment, like the Cultural Strategy Commission and then the Public Realm Design Framework. So both of these commissions, one of them started in December, just gone, and one of them is about to start. And both of these will have their own consultation processes, their own engagement processes. For example, with the creative placemaking consultant that we've appointed, there will be they're now still in the research stage, but there will be pop-up shops on the high street, not this weekend, but the weekend after. So if you want to input, then please come. And I will be there myself on the 4th of March, on the Friday, and the next session is on the 6th of March. This is just one example, and this is just the beginning of the process. And then there will be other creative workshops. There will be an online questionnaire. There will be an in-person questionnaire. We're also, and also like in mentioning the young people's voice. So for example, one of the head teachers of a local school is on the partnership board. And we also have on the partnership board other community members who work directly with young people. And we're hoping that this is one way of reaching the young voice. But then another thing we could do is also to kind of build these partnerships with local schools to kind of reach as many people as possible. So I hope this. So there will be various basically engagement opportunities as we move forward. But yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Thank you, Zeina. I think it does. And I think one of the things that come out of that is that the world has moved on, and we used to think of consultations, and consultations are very episodic things as policy gets developed. And we're moving into a world of continuous engagement. We have that where we, in our relationships with retailers, we don't just go to a shop, they constantly send us news and updates electronically. And the same thing applies here to development. Local authorities and developers are much more committed to continuous engagement and continuously having a conversation through various channels with the public. That doesn't mean that everything the public wants or various members of the public want, they will get. Every development represents compromises, and we know that well. I'd like to move on to another theme that's coming out of the questions, which is about the character of the area, and preserving and developing the character of the area is also a question about particular buildings of architectural merit on the high street. I wonder who would like to refer to that as something. There's that beautiful Art Deco Mall as well in the southern part of the high street. Anybody want to talk a little bit about the role of the heritage that we have in place?
Maybe I can just start and maybe other people can fill in. Because, I mean, these questions I would like to answer like maybe yes to all, but this is why we also have, we've just appointed we're starting this commission about creative placemaking that I mentioned, which involves this process of drawing out the town centers, heritage, cultural sites, and then kind of cultivating these in order to develop a very unique North Finchley identity that, and from my perspective, does involve Art Deco, but I don't know because the project has just started, and there will be a lot of consultation with the local community because it's kind of their town center, and they will have to input into what they feel matters to them about the town center and its identity. Mm-hmm. So that's my part, and then maybe someone else can fill in as well.
Thank you, and it's great to hear the wider context of culture in the borough that wraps around this particular development and others. Steve, do you have your?
Yeah, I think. Look, I think to follow on from what Zeina has said, I think we've got various kind of layers of culture and heritage, don't we? Whether it's existing buildings, kind of fabric and remnants of what the town centre used to be, whether it's cultural heritage, or whether it's some of the kind of ongoing kind of occupiers and users. We're in a kind of period of study, and we're very, very mindful of the responsibility kind of incumbent upon us that this is an existing area and has all of these existing attributes. And lots of these existing attributes, whether it's buildings or uses, are very, very good and very, very important. So this isn't an exercise in sweeping things away and starting again. It absolutely isn't. This equally is not a brownfield site. This isn't the lands around Brent Cross Shopping Centre, for instance, to give a local example. It's very, very, very different. So we are working already with local historians. We are working with our own professional team around studying and auditing all of these buildings, listening to what people's views in the community are on them as part of this current exercise. And when we make kind of decisions around master planning, and playing back to one of your points, David, about we will absolutely listen to everyone's opinion on everything we might bring forward here. And that doesn't mean we will ultimately agree, or the council will ultimately agree as the decision maker with everything that comes forward. But everything will get fair hearing and thorough analysis. And we will balance kind of the benefits that the development can give rise to against some things that everyone might not be overly happy with. But that's the challenge that we have in front of us.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come in on that before I move on to a slightly different theme? No? Okay, great. Sarah, you used a phrase trying to curate the high street. And I was wondering about the powers to do that, because one of the things about that high streets provide when they're really good is sort of density of experience. There's a lot happening in a relatively small space. It keeps you there, it keeps you engaged. You go out there in all sorts of moods and for all sorts of reasons, because that's your outdoors. That's the hinterland of where you live, and it provides that density. And that is about curation, some of which happens spontaneously through market forces, but some of it's also in the hands of public bodies and their philosophies and their powers. Do you have the powers you need, do you think, to curate a high street these days?
I suppose it depends in which way you deem intervention to be effective. There's obviously not a huge amount that local authorities can do now through the planning system or the licensing system in which to directly impact who goes where. I think the point around North Finchley is that obviously there is significant opportunity for further diversification. The aims are to keep people in the high street longer, to provide a wider variety of offerings. And until we get some significant improvements to facilitate that, what we want to really be doing is encouraging that kind of diversity in the high street to come forward through this regeneration. So it's a little bit more of a difficult question to answer. I suppose the opportunities and the strategies that we put in place, combined with what the council can reasonably sort of intervene on control and actually support, everything that Zeina mentioned around business support, really understanding the challenges of the existing retailers that we've got, the ones that are very highly valued. It's how we support them, but also how we create much more excitement around North Finchley, how we create a much better area that those, flagship brands will want to move into North Finchley. I mean, it's a very, in parts, and it's a very wealthy area. People want to spend their money locally, and we want to give them the opportunities to do so and to really try and foster an environment that a lot of these market forces will come into and contribute to North Finchley.
Thank you. Jonathan, you've worn, by the sound of it, several pairs of shoes. Now, you may have found the cobbler on your high street in your walks, but what do you think about the powers to curate? Do you think there's sufficient of them?
One of the most interesting things about all this is the way in which landlords have undertaken commercial lettings in the past. I remember when I first arrived in this country in 1971, being given a lecture by a local charter surveyor chap about the fact that the only way in which to undertake lettings was with a 25-year upward-only rent review, fully repairing and insuring lease. There was some sort of religion amongst the landowning institutions and private landlords that said, our involvement shall be the receipt of 4 checks a year. Nothing really has changed to any great extent, except the fact that checks are now replaced largely by bank transfers. And when you find yourself looking at a property that is let for the best part of 25 years with 5-yearly rent reviews, part of you says, well, that's fantastic. I don't have to do anything. But therein lies the dissolution of flexibility and curating. We are not going to do that. Although most of the properties that we will acquire to undertake our developments are let on that basis for historic reasons, we intend to create a much more symbiotic relationship with the tenants, to work with them and to enable curation. It's all very well finding an amazing person who makes and sells hats and helping them with their vision to create a hat shop on Finchley High Road. But by the time that person has reached that stage in life, the chances are they're perhaps already 40 or 50. And you can't say to them, I would like you to continue and do this every day until you're 75. people get ill, people change, people move away, all kinds of things happen. And when you're trapped in that long, inflexible lease system, it's very, very hard to curate. Things go wrong, things happen, people lose businesses. I think that we need to work with the local authority, both in terms of their obvious stakeholder interest and their job, which is to collect business rates, and create a much more synchronous arrangement. And to the greatest extent possible, we're going to encourage just that.
Thank you. And there are some fascinating examples. I mean, we're involved in some work in Catford in Lewisham, where there's been a phenomenal attempt at using meanwhile uses in order to start seeing what kind of businesses can be attracted and thrive and create clusters in the local area. There's some really imaginative models out there. So thank you. I'd like to move to another theme that's come up in the questions, which is around sustainability and transport. Now, I know that it's far too soon to talk about what plans might be in the longer term, but clearly, if we're looking at a development that's for the long term, that's laying foundations for the future, then considerations of sustainability are going to be quite high. There's also the ideas of 20 or 15-minute neighborhoods and the idea of permeability, that how do you actually reach that high street from that immediate hinterland where people live? And it'd be interesting to hear a little bit more about what your thinking is about sustainability and also access and permeability. Without expecting you to be hugely specific at this point, of course. Who would like to start on that? Sarah, probably?
I mean, I can start from sort of the borough level, and then I don't know whether Steve's probably got a little bit more to say on what they are doing in terms of looking at transport. But from a corporate level, we have a sustainability strategy. We desire to be sort of a net zero council by 2030. A big part of that obviously comes from the housing stock and a lot of our assets across the borough. So sustainability is something that is hugely important. And obviously a lot of revised guidance is forever coming up. And I'm sure that Regal and any other future developer in the area will be looking at that very seriously. It's certainly something that we want to make sure. We want to make sure that, you know, we're giving homes for residents that are efficient, that are low cost to heat. On the other side of things, when it comes to things like 20-minute neighbourhoods and sustainability, I mean, I think what I would say is that the jury is still out on that in Barnet at the moment. We are not a fan of low traffic neighbourhoods. We've made that very, very clear. And any sort of sustainability or public realm improvement we would want to see come forward in North Finchley would one that is robustly backed by evidence before any decisions can be made. That being said, I think there are also a number of opportunities to improve sustainable transport across Barnet. I know there's been a lot of enthusiasm for some of the more local sustainable strategies that we have implemented. And I think that'll be another really, really interesting thing that will come part and be a big part of the consultation, I dare bet. So that's sort of from my perspective. I'll hand over to Steve.
Yeah, a couple of follow-on thoughts, I think, from a Regal London perspective, and then specifically on some of the studies we might do in North Finchley. When it comes to sustainability in the built environment, we have now launched or kind of specific sustainability strategy, which Regal London will hold itself to account to, quite aside from the various standards and kind of minimum thresholds that Sarah mentions are kind of in guidance and legislation. We have a objective in the business to move to net zero by 2030, which is a nice headline. How we do that and how we get there is the important piece. And that, in effect, should have said at the outset, we are not just a kind of developer who kind of farms out our work to contractors. We are the developer and the contractor. So the building company is sat within Regal, which means we have full control over how and what we build. And we can therefore pass down our demands and requirements to our supply chain and everyone who steps onto one of our construction sites. So our model of kind of controlling the whole life cycle of the development means we think it sets us in good stead to continue on our journey towards better and more sustainable buildings and projects. Turning to the point around transport and taking on kind of Sarah's comments about the specifics of Barnet and particularly the specifics of North Finchley, I think what we're looking at in the studies that will come up will be, we will need to evidence and look at what the correct level of modal shift is here, I guess, to use a transport terminology, and not being too kind of controversial about it. I think we're all very much aware that the private motor car tends to kind of rule the roost in Barnet and a wider North London setting. Whether or not that continues to be the case and things carry on as they are today is something that needs to be looked at. But how we have certain interventions that potentially in certain locations reduce that car dependency. Part of that comes with people living in the town centre. Do they really need a car parking space if they're already living in the town centre with all the facilities? Potentially not. But equally, we don't want to cut off the ability of people to come into the town centre who might need to drive to get there. And that needs catering for as well. I think, to finish my comments, I suppose, on one little anecdotal element, we're working with a firm called Civic Engineers and Planet IE, and they've done a lot of work in the north of England in Altrincham on the outskirts of Manchester. And they show me a little before and after photograph very, very regularly, where you had, a town centre square, which had car parking all around it and routes moving all the way through. Let's say the image had 100 cars in the image. They then show me today where there's still movement, there's still taxi drop off, there's still vehicles moving through, but so much of the space has been captured back for outdoor seating and cafes and better public realm, improved and enhanced shop frontages. And there is areas of North Finchley, not everywhere, there's areas of North Finchley, think of somewhere potentially like Ballard's Lane, where that's a real possibility. So no conclusions yet, I think, as we've said probably regularly on the call, but we will test all of these things, I think, and make sure everything is rigorously looked at.
Brilliant, thank you. We have just 3 minutes left, so I think it's probably time to sum up. I hope we've addressed at least a good number of the questions that the audience have asked. We've tried to consolidate them and bring them together. To me, a few things really stand out here. I think Jonathan's sort of historical and geographic perspective is terribly important, because when you want to think about what you bring in, you want to project forward and you want to think, what are the levers that we have? So clearly the very diffuse ownership is going to be a massive challenge here. And I'm glad that we're being absolutely upfront about, or you are being absolutely upfront about that. It's a hugely important point. And also just the idea that the street is too long. What do you do about that? How do you bring things into a more dense, cohesive environment is really, really important. And I think the thing that probably the overwhelming thing I'm left with is what a massive challenge it is to try and anticipate how you build something that will thrive, not only in the context that we can understand and project now of 3, 5, 7 years, but with enough flexibility in it and enough sustainability to actually last for decades going forward. So it's been absolutely brilliant to hear from all of you, and I hugely appreciate everyone's perspective on this. We probably have 1 minute for any last words from the panelists. And if not, I will hand back to Bonnie. And massive thanks to you all, and a huge thanks to the audience for these really stimulating questions. Thank you very much. Bonnie.
Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thank you, to our panel for a great discussion this morning. It seems like we might have to have a follow-up session on North Finchley as the plans develop, because there's clearly a great deal of interest. Based on the number of questions, we'll try and send those on to panellists and see if there's a way we can pick up some of them offline as well. And there's still a lot of great ideas being shared as well, so hopefully a good start to everyone's Thursday. Before we end, a quick note to the audience, there's still more to come from Real Estate Live UK this week, as David mentioned. Starting right now at 11:30 a.m, we have a panel on the S in ESG, and then at 2 p.m, we have a panel with the IOD on the Africa opportunity, so something a bit different there. And then we're discussing biodiversity in new garden community developments at 4 p.m. At 2 p.m, and then at 4 p.m, we have our closing keynote on levelling up. So a very busy day, lots of other things to tune into. So hope you can join us again for those. You can book onto them on our website. And thank you once again for joining us for this brilliant session, and look forward to seeing you all again soon.